Hello again. I'm gonna. This is a short video on control charts, specifically for this case study. Um, I'm gonna show you how one way to deal with the control charts. There's many ways, and there are multiple ways to kind of go about this. You can kind of search online, look at YouTube clips how to do this. I'll show you one key thing that you gotta think about though. The control chart is typically we use it a lot in manufacturing processes. And if you see some result that's out of the ordinary, so it's beyond typically plus or minus 3 standard deviations from the mean, then you want to be able to detect this. Um, I think one of the key things you got to think about here, especially when you're looking at the trying to detect fraud, is you want to be able to set up these plus or minus 3 standard deviation range using some kind of a subset of data, as in some reference data. Right? So, for example, in our data set, the data ranges from 2012 to 2015. If fraud's already been happening in, let's say, the later years, you don't want those data points to change the mean and the standard deviation. So you want to set the mean and standard deviation in the early years when you didn't have the fraud, so that you can detect fraud in the later years. So hopefully that makes sense. So the key thing here is, if I want to look at the inventory level of, let's say, one of the materials like stainless steel, and I want to detect whether or not the inventory level is up, unusually high, I'll probably want to set the reference points on an earlier level, right? So the plus or minus 3 sigma or plus or minus 3 standard deviation, and the mean is determined by an earlier step, a reference point, earlier span of data. So I'll kind of go through that with you today. Um, Again, there's probably many different, maybe there's even easier ways to do this. I'll show you one way. I think you can do this. So let me show it. Let me start with this. Let me first start with the reference. Let's look at the inventory level of sales. So in another video, I showed you how to create this inventory calculate fields. So I'll just show you what the calculate field of sales still looks like. Okay, so this is a formula for the same sale. So it's all set. It works fine. Okay, let me plot this out to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to put that there, and I'll put the transaction date on the column. Set up by the month, and then this is the change in the reference in the inventory of stainless steel. And let's say again, I'm going to put the site code. I'm only going to look at the state of Illinois in this case. Okay, so this looks a bit suspicious, right? It looks like there's really high inventory in 2015 versus the previous years, where the change in inventory seems to be very high, very positive. So there's a built up inventory in the later months in the data set. So if I want to see whether this is out of the ordinary, I want to set some kind of control chart. I probably only want to include though the data up to, let's say, the third quarter of 2014. So maybe September, including the September 2014, and then see how far this whole section is away from all the data preceding it. Okay, so there's many ways to do this, I believe, but I'll show you one way I think was easier for me to think about, and hopefully this will help you kind of get through the second part of the case. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go to the transaction date dimension under the transaction table, and I'm going to create a set. Okay, so this is going to be a subset of the full range of data I have. So if I go to the custom list, it spans from January 1st to December 31st, 2015. I don't want to use all of these data points when I'm trying to create my control chart, right? So I want the standard deviation and the mean or the average to be based on just the data up to the third quarter of 2014, for example, right? So I can go and unclick all of the ones I don't want, or I can just go to the condition, and then by field, I'm gonna go down to, again, the TR transaction date right here, and I'm gonna set the maximum. I'm gonna say less than or equal to. I'm gonna set the date here. You can type it in or use your mouse, whatever you prefer. January 13th of 2014. Okay, so the third quarter of 2014. So just press load and see. So yeah, my data goes from January 1st to December 31st, 2015. This set's only going to include up to the September 30th of 2014. Okay, so I say okay. So that's my set one. Okay, so let me rename this to, let's say, control chart ref. Okay, so this is only going to include the dates that I want in my control chart. Okay, so I want my average and my standard deviation to be based on these dates only. So it doesn't include the last quarter of 2014 and all of 2015. Next, I'm going to create another, basically a duplicated calculate field for the inventory stainless steel, but just using my set that I just created. So I'm just going to click on the set. I can click anywhere I want. I'm going to create another calculated field. I'm going to call this, let's call this inventory stainless steel, and I'll call it ref. Okay, so the formula here is that this parameter is basically a true or false, yes or no, right? Or 1 or 0. Okay, so I only want to include the data points where it falls in the dates that are specified. So all I have to do is say if this is true, if it's 1, if it's true, then the value here would be, is I could reference another calculated field. So it's going to be, the reference I'm going to make here is the inventory stainless steel. Okay, and I'll say okay. All right, so I have this other stainless steel reference. Okay, that's, so let me just to test it out. Let me drag this out. Okay, and I'll put this new stainless steel reference in there. So let me try that again. Okay, now you see the values stop at September 2014. Okay, so that's different, right? So if I remove this and put back the original, the dates all go all the way to the end of 2015. Now my new reference, it's exactly the same thing, except now this is going to go down, go only up to September 30th of 2014. Right? So this is what I want to use to create. Basically, I want to use this to create my control chart. Okay, so let's create the control chart now. Right, so I'm going to go to analytics. Okay, you know, before I do that, let me actually bring in. Yeah, I'm just going to bring. Let's bring in a reference distribution band. Okay, I'm going to drag this to. I'm going to put it in the pane. Okay, and I'm going to change this to standard deviations under distribution per pane, and I'm going to change the factors -3, 3. Okay, and then I'm going to change the label to none. Okay, and let's see, that's fine. So I'll just leave the fill the same. I'll say okay. So this is the plus or minus 3 standard deviations away from the mean. Let's say, you know, I'll just add a reference line as well. I'll put a reference line again per pane, put it on the sum again, right? So this is the average. That's the average line. I probably don't want the, you know, the label again. Okay, say okay. So this is the mean line, the average line, and this is 3 standard deviations above and 3 standard deviations below. So right now, for, you know, up to year 2014, everything's under control, right? The variability you see is expected, right? Or, you know, statistically, you know, it could happen, right? There's a higher percent that might happen, right? So now let's add in the rest of the data, the full data, and see what this looks like. So I'm going to drag in now the inventory stainless steel to the rows, and this is going to create another graph, right? Now the top graph only goes up to November, end of September 2014. The bottom one spans the entire data set up to 2015, right? So now I'm going to combine these into one graph, okay? So I'm going to click down here, or I can right click on the bottom. I'm going to change this to dual axis, okay? And now this is combined. right? So the problem here now, though, is you see how the left side and the right side's got a different scale. So I'm going to click on the right-hand side. You know what? Let me click on the left-hand side. Let me position it with this. So I'm going to, no, I have to do it on the right-hand side. And I do synchronize axis. And then now they are basically overlaid with each other. Okay. And then what I can also do is I'm going to change the color now so that they're both the same color. So it looks like they're basically one line, right? Okay, so I can even hide this now. Okay. You can simply hide by right-clicking and selecting, deselecting show header. This is gone. And also now right-click on the null since I have indicator. So this looks like basically one line. And you see now in 2015, this is very suspicious now, right? And I could also then hide this card as well. And then I can rename this axis, and I probably just want to rename this as stainless steel inventory, change in inventory. Okay, close this out. And this is my change in inventory graph for the state of Illinois with the control chart, with the showing the band from plus or minus 3 standard deviations or 3 sigmas of the mean. If I just look at the data up to the third quarter of 2014. So that's it. Hopefully this is helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions, and take care.